So, picture this. It's 1608. A rebellion flares up in the north of Ireland, and it's stamped out in less than 3 months. You'd think it would be a footnote in history, right? Well, the consequences of that failure would echo for centuries, completely reshaping the province of Ulster. We're going to dive into how the fall of just one night didn't just end a war, it lit the fuse for a whole new one.
And it all starts with this single, contemptuous insult, spoken by Sir George Paulet, the English governor of the new city of Derry. These were words that would prove fatal, not just for him, but for the entire Gaelic way of life in Ulster.
See, the man Paulet said this to wasn't some nobody. He was Sir Cahir O'Doherty, a powerful Gaelic lord, and, up until that very moment, a knight of the realm, a loyal subject of the English crown. This one deeply personal insult was about to have consequences that went way beyond just the two men involved.
And that's the big question here, isn't it? What could possibly push a man who had built his entire career on loyalty to the English to suddenly risk everything, his lands, his title, his life, in a blaze of rebellion? The answer, well, it really shows the deep cracks running through Ireland at the time.
To really understand the fall, you first have to understand the rise, because before he was a rebel, Sir Cahir O'Doherty was actually one of the crown's most important Gaelic allies in a very, very unstable Ulster.
Now, what's so interesting here is that this timeline shows a real path of cooperation. During the absolutely brutal 9 Years' War, a teenage O'Doherty actually sided with the English against other powerful Gaelic lords. And for that, he was rewarded, big time. He got a knighthood, the official title to his family's huge lands, and even positions of power in the new English administration. He was, by all accounts, the model of the kind of assimilated lord the crown wanted to create.
But the political landscape was shifting. After the flight of the Earls in 1607, when Ulster's most powerful Gaelic leaders basically fled to Europe, English officials saw their chance to really cement their power. And O'Doherty, who was once this valued ally, was now starting to look more like an obstacle.
This slide really just lays out the two opposing forces that were on a collision course. On one side, you have O'Doherty's personal grievances. The new English officials were just chipping away at his power and his wealth, taking his fishing rights, challenging his title to his own land, and even throwing him in jail based on rumors. But on the other side, these weren't random acts. They were all part of a much bigger English strategy to completely break the old Gaelic power structure and clear the way for new Protestant settlers. And this was the moment it all snapped. All the legal fights and the money problems were one thing, but a public physical blow for a Gaelic lord, that was an attack on his honor, an absolute humiliation he couldn't tolerate. In that one instant, loyalty evaporated and turned to rage.
And man, things escalated fast. Spurred on by his advisor, Phelim Reg MacDavid, O'Doherty didn't just want an apology, he wanted total revenge. He cleverly seized a nearby fort to get his hands on weapons, and then he turned his forces on Derry itself. The city was burned to the ground, and Governor Paulet, well, he paid the ultimate price for his insult.
O'Doherty got his revenge, but by attacking a crown city and killing its governor, he'd crossed the line. There was no coming back from that. The English response was immediate, it was organized, and it was absolutely overwhelming.
For all its initial fire and fury, the rebellion was pretty much doomed from the start. O'Doherty just couldn't rally enough support from other Gaelic clans. A lot of them were exhausted from past wars and, frankly, they were terrified of the crown's power. He was basically on his own, facing the full might of the state.
You can just see the mismatch here. The Lord Deputy, Chichester, brought in a professional army. They used brutal scorched earth tactics, burning everything to deny the rebels food and shelter. A naval blockade cut off any chance of escape. Against this coordinated machine, O'Doherty's fighters, no matter how brave they just didn't stand a chance.
And then, the end came. It was in a short, sharp skirmish near Kilmacrennan. During the fight, Sir Cahir O'Doherty, the 21-year-old knight turned rebel, was killed by a single musket shot. And with its leader gone, the heart was ripped out of the rebellion. His forces just melted away.
For the English administration, just winning wasn't enough. No, they were determined to make a terrifying example out of anyone who dared to defy them. They wanted to make sure no one would ever try something like this again.
And this table lays out the brutal reality. O'Doherty's head was cut from his body and stuck on a spike outside Dublin Castle as a gruesome warning. His top advisor, Phelim Riach MacDavid, was captured and executed for treason along with dozens of their followers. This wasn't just justice, it was a calculated act of state terror. But the punishment didn't stop with their bodies. This number represents the massive ancestral lands of the O'Doherty clan, a huge territory that was now legally seized by the crown.
So you gotta ask yourself, who benefited most from all this? Well, how about the Lord Deputy himself, Sir Arthur Chichester, the very same guy who crushed the rebellion. He was granted the entirety of O'Doherty's lands, which made him one of the richest men in Ireland. The rebellion wasn't just a crisis. For some, it was a golden opportunity.
Now, to really get the loyalty between O'Doherty and his advisor MacDavitt, we have to understand this Gaelic idea of a sept. Think of it as more than just an alliance. A sept is a branch of a bigger clan, and they're bound together by shared ancestry. The MacDavitts were a sept of the O'Dohertys, which means their loyalty was literally a family affair.
And this is where the story gets really wild, taking a modern turn. We don't just have to rely on old texts to understand this bond. Modern genetic testing, Y-DNA analysis, has actually confirmed it. Men today with the last name MacDavitt, or MacDade, share a unique genetic marker with men named O'Doherty, proving they have a shared ancestor way back when. Their alliance in 1608 wasn't just political, it was literally a bond of blood.
Okay, so now we get to the true, lasting legacy of O'Doherty's failed rebellion. His defiant act, as costly as it was for him, gave the English the perfect justification for a project that would change Ireland forever, the Plantation of Ulster.
Just look at this chart. Before the rebellion, the Crown's plan for the plantation was, well, it was kind of limited. They were just focused on the lands the Earls had left behind. But O'Doherty's revolt was the perfect excuse to blow the whole thing wide open, seizing not just his lands, but millions of acres across 6 entire counties.
The result was basically a revolution, imposed from the top down. The old Gaelic system was completely dismantled. Huge areas of land were handed over to Protestant settlers from England and Scotland, and the native Irish, even the ones who hadn't rebelled, were pushed onto the poorest land. This policy created the deep demographic and sectarian divides in Ulster that have defined its history ever since.
And that was it. O'Doherty's rebellion was the final death knell for the old Gaelic world in the north. It wasn't just the end of one man or one clan. It was the end of a social and political order that had existed for over 1,000 years.
And that leaves us with this haunting question. The Plantation of Ulster set conflicts in motion that have lasted right up to our own time. And so much of that history, all that strife, was accelerated and justified by this short, failed rebellion. A rebellion that didn't start with a grand strategy, but with personal pride, a public insult, and a slap in the face. It really makes you wonder how differently everything could have turned out.